I wonder when I read about another fast if there were some in the group who were saying, I just finished fasting. Is he nuts? We just did this, didn't we? I wonder if some thought that yesterday's act of dedication was good enough for today's problem. Here's the thing. We must certainly continually return to the Lord to seek His face. My wife and I have a really good relationship. The first year we were married, we nearly killed each other, but the next 33 were great. But do you think if we didn't spend any time with each other that we would have that kind of relationship? Yeah. Spend time with God. If you want an intimate relationship with God, spend time with Him. Nothing else will work. Spend time with your Lord. Yesterday's sanctification is not sufficient for today's problem. Ezra says they sought God concerning this matter specifically. The last phrase in verse 23 tells us that they acknowledged the blessing and the empowering of God. Very simple. And He answered our prayer. And you might as well underline that 3 or 4 times in your Bible. And He answered our prayer. One thing that prayer does is it boosts our confidence. We talk to the Father about a situation. In essence, He says, I'll handle it. And then we give Him praise for doing so. And then the next time we go through another situation, we see God's hand move, sometimes miraculously. And we say, hey, this isn't hard at all. And then in those times when God doesn't answer the second that we ask, sometimes He'll do that. And I'm not at all sure why, except that He's trying to do something in us, trying to build our faith and our trust in Him. When my granddaughter wants something, she just keeps screaming until we give it to her. And we're not always sure what she wants. And so we'll give her one thing and that didn't work, so we give her something else and that didn't work, so we give her something else, and eventually we figure it out. I think that's what God does with us. He gives us what we're asking for immediately when we're young in the Lord. And as we grow, and there's more things He's trying to do through us, the answer doesn't come maybe quite so quickly. But those times when the answer isn't coming as quick, we remember that we asked before, and He provided. And we know we can trust Him. Ezra prayed, God answered, Ezra rejoiced. And I'm not suggesting that Ezra knew at that moment that God had answered the prayer, because the passage is reflective. Might not have been till afterward that Ezra realized. But nonetheless, he asked, God answered, he rejoiced. The next thing that Ezra did was to divide up the responsibilities, the tasks for the work. First, he identified the key leaders in verse 24. Then I set apart 12 of the leading priests, together with Sherebiah and Hashabiah and 10 of their brothers. Ezra had to choose then how to proceed. How are we going to do this? He could have put all the silver and the gold and the utensils for the temple together into wagons and surrounded them with all the men. Sometimes the way you work in ministry is you all work together on one project. Sometimes you have to divide it up into smaller projects. In this case, Ezra thought it was safer and wiser to split up the people into squads. And he divided up the goods and the riches for the temple amongst them. This meant that there was no single place where bandits could strike and get all the treasure. Yet Ezra needed trusted men and leading priests, and he found them. Verse 25. he distributed the work. And I weighed out to them the offering of silver and gold and the articles that the king, Artaxerxes, you remember him, that the king, his advisors, his officials, and all of Israel present there had donated for the house of our God. I weighed out to them 650 talents of silver, silver articles weighing 100 talents, 100 talents of gold, 20 bowls of gold valued at 1,000 darics, and 2 fine articles of polished bronze as precious as gold. President Ronald Reagan used to say, trust but verify. Ezra trusted these men, but everything was carefully weighed and checked so that each man could report to Jerusalem with exactly what was given to him. In order for the ministry, and I use the term loosely, but it was a ministry, in order for the ministry to restart in Jerusalem, many people had to do what they could faithfully. Each one had to take responsibility for their part of the body. How many times have you heard me say that God has given us all various talents and abilities, and alone we can get some jobs done. Together we can get everything done. But it takes all of us. Every last one of us. Failure for any one leader to lead properly, or any one servant to betray the others, would have led to disaster, or at least hindered the work significantly. The body has many members. We must all do our part. Well, then Ezra charged the workers with the tasks that he gave them. Verses 28 and 29 says, I said to them, you as well as these articles are consecrated to the Lord. The silver and gold are a free will offering to the Lord, the God of your fathers. Guard them carefully until you weigh them out in the chambers of the house of the Lord in Jerusalem before the leading priests and the Levites and the family heads of Israel. I think it's significant that Ezra reminded them verbally of their commitment to the Lord and to his property. There has to be calls to holiness. We don't see that much in the church anymore. But there has to be calls to holiness. They have to come forcefully. They have to come frequently. We are called to live holy lifestyles. I'm sorry. We're in the same human body that everybody else is, but we are not the same as everybody else. We are the church of Jesus Christ. We are to be a holy people. Our lifestyles need to reflect who's living in us. Ministry filled with information but not characterized by poignant calls for transformation is cheap ministry. Let me say that again, because a lot of people have itching ears and they like to hear fun things. Warm and fuzzy. Give me warm and fuzzy. Ministry filled with information but not characterized by poignant calls for transformation is cheap ministry. And the challenge was accepted by the leaders in verse 30. Then the priests and the Levites received the silver and gold and sacred articles that had been weighed out to be taken to the house of our God in Jerusalem. The leaders accepted the charge that was given to them. And they took responsibility for their own actions. They understood the objectives, and each one was working toward fulfilling them. Though they traveled separately, each one was working for one great goal, to honor God by bringing the new team into God's temple, complete with support and equipment. Then in Ezra 8:31, we see God's protection in the work. On the 12th day of the first month, we set out from the Ahava Canal to go to Jerusalem. The hand of our God was upon us, and he protected us from enemies and bandits along the way.